I was traveling in one of the Middle Eastern countries a long time back, and I happened to cross the border. And when I was coming back, I wanted to cross back into the country that I had left from. And it was the time of Jumu'ah, and they told me, you have a Zimbabwean passport, you actually need a visa to go in. And I told them, but hang on, I was here about 10 days back when I was crossing, and no one told me this. I crossed and there was no visa. He said, no, the law has just changed 2 days ago. Now I have a flight to catch, and I'm making dua to Allah, and I say, Ya Allah, help me. Ya Allah, I'm in need. Help me, Ya Allah. What am I going to do? I've got a flight to catch, and I need to return home. And so it was the time of Jumu'ah, and the adhan went. And mashallah, there was a masjid in the border post. And so I went, I'm making dua to Allah, and I sat down. And the Imam spoke about, now this is called the help of Allah. Not from me, nothing at all. The Imam was speaking about helping people in desperation, helping people in need, and how Allah will assist you if you assist someone who's desperate, who's in need. And guess what? There was a man next to me who greeted me, and I greeted him back. And then I greeted him immediately after the talk. And I nodded my head, smiled at him and so on, and we started our salah. We were standing in the saf, straightening, the feet, and I started my salah and I ended. And when I finished, I made a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I don't know, it's only you that's going to help. And so what happened is, I came out, I had hope in my heart, but I was also making a plan B, to say, let's go back and we'll do this, we'll change tickets, perhaps leave from another city altogether. And as I went in, I told this brother who was behind the counter that, look, you know what, please, I need your help. He says, only my boss can do it for you. So can I see him? He says, yeah, well, you can, maybe. You can enter that door, and if he's there, you're lucky. So I went by the door, there was someone cleaning. Knocked on the door opened. Who was the boss? The man who sat next to me just the time of the khutbah and salah, and he read right next to me. And guess how I started my story? Assalamu alaikum. You can remember the smile, can't you, So I looked at him and I'm saying to myself, let me try and choose the best way of convincing him such that he will not be able to say no if he has a heart. I said, mashallah, I'm in need. I'm desperately in need. And I'm convinced Allah will send the help. And I hope and I pray that help can come through you at least, so that inshallah, I will be able to at least cross here. He looks at me and he thought for a moment, and I'm quite certain that the words of the Imam were ringing in his head. And then he tells me something. He says, you're right. It's only from Allah, not from me. He wrote in my passport, this man has been given oral permission to enter the country. The Arab nations, some of them, they have this. I don't know about now, but I'm talking of quite a while back. And he wrote it. I went to the front. The man looked at it and smiled. He stamped it and let me cross. As simple as ABC. But my life was coming to an end, basically, if that didn't happen. Not to an end, but what I mean is, it was going to be quite difficult. And then I told myself, I said, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine if we didn't greet. Imagine if I just sat. Imagine if he didn't greet. It was his quality. He was a big boss. I didn't even know. But he greeted, and this is what helped. And I greeted back. And this is why, remember, sometimes we are arrogant. It's shaitan that overtakes us. We are human. We need to check it again. Make sure you remove it. Fight it. Fight it. Be humble. I've seen people with mega wealth, and you'll never pick up that this man has wealth. And I've seen people with next to nothing, and they have their first $1,000, and next thing they feel like, subhanallah, I'm Bill Gates. Allahu Akbar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us goodness of the dunya as well as goodness of the akhirah.
And as I begin the second part of my khutbah, my dear brothers and sisters, I want to share with you another beautiful story. This is the story of a man who was originally Egyptian, but he lives in the beautiful city of Al-Madinah Al-Munawwarah. And he has made Hajj for the last 20 years in a row, every single year. And he was doing an interview recently, and he was asked, you as a janitor, as a poor man, what do you think is the cause that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps calling you back to His house? So in this interview, the man says, this is purely from the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm not sure of the exact reason, but I do remember a particular incident in my very first Hajj that I saved up for the whole entire year before I came for my first Hajj. And I went on this great journey. And as I'm on a bus on my way to Mecca, I see this old woman who is old in age, big in size, struggling to walk with her cane. And you can see that she is in an immense amount of pain. So I thought to myself, what type of individual would I be if I, as a young man, sat on the bus and this old woman had to walk all the way to Mecca? So while we were stuck in traffic, I got off the bus and I went to this woman and I said, "Oh, my dear mother, I ask you by Allah that please take my seat and I will walk in your place instead." And this woman, she started to cry with tears, thanking Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent someone that would take her on a bus rather than her having to walk. And as she was getting on the bus, she turns around to that man and she says, "Oh, my dear son, I pray to Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never prevents you from making Hajj again." And he says, "Allah knows best, but I believe that was the cause that each and every single year, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends someone knocking on my door that requests my help in going for Hajj. Or they request my company, or they say, I want to take you to Hajj for free." And each and every single year for the last 20 years, this is what has happened. My dear brothers and sisters, when we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to remember that nothing is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was thrown into the fire and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the fire to be cool and peaceful. Maryam, the mother of Isa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted her a miraculous birth, even though it was not humanly or physically possible. Isa alayhi salam was born speaking in his cradle. Yunus alayhi salam was devoured whole by a whale and taken to the bottom of the ocean. And when he called out to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was there to protect him and grant him that which he desires. My dear brothers and sisters, that is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَآتَاكُم مِّن كُلِّ مَا سَأَلْتُمُوهُ. That if you were to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is shy to turn our hands away empty-handed. Rather, we are the ones that fall deficient. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this great blessing, yet we do not take advantage of it. My dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not get angry when we keep asking for the things that we want and desire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes angry when we don't ask of Him, when we think of ourselves self-sufficient. My dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated this act of dua as our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is our way of conversing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why it is one of the most beloved acts of worship.